Hi, this is Remy from Tailscale, and on today's video, we're celebrating a special milestone with a very special guest, Alex.
Yeah, hello. This is weird to me too, but anyway, Remy suggested that we had a little chat and answer some questions from my past that maybe you lot might find interesting too. So, should we do this?
I was gonna say, we just passed a very exciting milestone of 50,000 subscribers. Congratulations! I know it's
Thank
a
you.
lot of work.
Yes. Well, couldn't do it without the audience, of course, and I know that sounds super cliche, but each and every person that listens and watches is what puts us here collectively. It's not just me; it's a whole team behind the scenes. But it's crazy to me because when I started, there was like, I don't know, 1,000 subscribers to the channel.
That's pretty cool. I mean, you're halfway to a silver play button.
Oh, I want that thing so bad.
Can't wait for that. I cannot wait for that. Gonna have an extra special 100,000 subscriber special.
You know, the nice thing about Tailscale too is we don't have any offices. Like, it's a fully remote company, so it's not like HQ is going to steal my plaque and put it up in the office. Like,
that bad boy's going right in the background. I know you're gonna have to get the the YouTuber shelf with the
yeah. Well, I've got a little space
right
like here somewhere. Maybe it could go. I don't know. We'll see.
So you said the channel had about 1,000 subscribers when you first started.
Wow.
That's, I mean, 50,000 50,000 subscribers later. How has it been? How has it been growing the channel?
Well, here's the weird thing about subscriber counts is I don't actually put a huge amount of stock in them. I don't think they actually matter that much. I mean, they have certain parts of the YouTube economy, the subscriber count matters. But the Tailscale YouTube channel is a very unique animal in so much as that it's essentially a vehicle to advertise Tailscale. If you boil it down to its core component, that's what it's for. That's what I'm here for, effectively. But I do my absolute best to not be a shill, which I know is weird. But I think the general gist of the channel that I try and operate by is like, what would I find interesting to watch? Like, what are the questions I would have as a potential Tailscale user? How would I want to integrate Tailscale into my Homelab, for example? And then I just try and answer those questions. And then the subscriber count, the reason I say I don't think that's terribly important is you look at the view counts for every video, and some of them are 100, 200, 300,000 views, and other videos get like 5. So it's not like every single person in that 50,000 club is going to watch every single video. But as part of the sort of traditional YouTuber economy where you're reaching out to sponsors for people to send you things and all the rest of it, like, it's an indication of the size and reach of your brand, effectively.
Yeah.
But we don't really do, we definitely don't do paid sponsored reviews or anything on the channel. Like, if we want to, we reviewed the GLI Net Comet a couple of weeks ago. We just buy it and review it. Like, there's no ulterior motive. We just think it's a cool thing to show,
Yeah, that's a really, I think, nice feature of being, a YouTuber on a kind of the sort of, Tailscale corporate channel where you're not necessarily worried about, exactly what sponsor you can.
It also means less of the shocked faces and all
I know.
that
I love
the
that. I
thumbnails.
love the Alex. I want more Alex shocked faces. We need another session of Alex, Alex shocked faces.
Maybe.
You mentioned that, some videos have 5, or some videos will have 5 views. Some videos will have 200,000 views. I know that the view counts don't correlate to, maybe which ones that you liked the most or which ones that you poured your heart and soul into. Sometimes it's the quick and dirty video that does the best versus the one you spent forever on. Were there any surprises when, have you had any surprises along the way in terms of videos that did, well, that you weren't expecting or not so well?
I remember the sheer excitement of, actually, abject terror of putting a video out into the world that you have worked really hard on, and it doesn't do well, and you're like, oh. But the first one that really surprised me was, I think it was the Apple TV video. And we're looking now at September 2023. So I'd been with the company for 6 weeks, and I did a video called Use Tailscale on your Apple TV, and it's sat at 40,000 views right now. And that was the first one that really kind of did any meaningful numbers. And then I did a follow-up in January, about 3 or 4 months later, and that's now at sort of 75,000 views or so. And those two combined, we actually saw not only YouTube views skyrocket, but we also saw metrics on the back end in the product change. And
That's
for me,
always
that was the
exciting.
light bulb moment of, oh, if we talk about a certain thing on the channel, we actually have a chance here to like shape how people use the product. Like, it's not just tutorials, which of course is a big part of what I do, but it's also like, we added subnet routing to the Apple TV because of the feedback on that first video, and then the second video did even better. So the next time I go to the product team and say our YouTube commenters want X, Y, and Z, we can point back to that historical trend of being like, well, it makes everything better.
What I think for a lot of people is you, Alex, you're pretty inextricably linked to how they think of Tailscale, especially if they're an avid YouTube viewer. They see your face, you explain cool home labbing concepts to them. And yeah, it's really exciting. We get to go try things based on suggestions that you make. And before you joined Tailscale, there wasn't an Alex. You weren't the face there explaining all of these cool home labbing concepts. And so I'm wondering, how did you discover Tailscale in the first place? I know for a lot of us, it's you is how we discovered Tailscale. How did you find Tailscale?
That is weird to me. Like, I really, if I look at what motivates me, it's getting other people as excited about the stuff that I find really interesting and cool. And one of the biggest pain points that I ever had, going back to the Linux server.io days, right the way from the beginning of my Homelab journey has been, in fact, even before it was called Homelab, was like, how do I access this stuff remotely? And I remember doing a bunch of weird stuff back in the day, like probably circumvented some corporate IT policies in the process, but they blocked outbound SSH on port 22. So there's me spinning up an SSH server on port 443 on my home server, and then using corkscrew to like hide the packets, obfuscate the packets, and put them out on the public. Anyway, so remote access has been a thorn in my proverbial side forever. Like, port forwarding's an option, but it's a bad option often, and then like SSH hops and all the rest of it. So I've always been on the lookout for something like Tailscale. And I was messing around with Tink back in the day, and a bunch of these others that promised what Tailscale now offers. And I was browsing the Synology App Store one day because they'd sent me a review unit for the podcast, the self-hosted podcast I was doing back then. And I saw in the App Store Tailscale, and I'm like, what's this? Never heard of it. And that's literally it. That's how I discovered it. I was just browsing an App Store one day. So as much as I like to go on about how much UIs are a waste of time, actually, for discoverability, they can have their uses. So yeah, I set up, I was actually working at that point on the WireGuard documentation for OpenSense. Like, I was all in on WireGuard. Like, I was actually in the middle of writing some complicated Ansible playbook to rotate keys, and I was like, right, I'm going to set aside a weekend to switch to Tailscale. And I was done in 20 minutes. And I'm like, it cannot possibly be this easy. This cannot be it. And it was. And then Tailscale came on as a sponsor for the podcast, and then they reached out to hire me as an employee. And here I am. So
I know you recently wound that down, and you were doing a podcast before, and you started doing the YouTube channel here. I think a lot of people would be actually really interested to know is what's the difference between sort of doing a podcast and doing a YouTube channel? What does that look like? You've done both, so would love to know.
Yeah, a podcast, you can get away with a lot because it was an audio only show, so edits are really easy to conceal, and for the most part, it's a stream of consciousness. Like, you've got a bunch of talking points, a bunch of bullet points. But because the show itself is sort of, 40 to 60 minutes, and you're covering a wide range of topics, you kind of just get into a flow and just sort of talk about the stuff. And nobody's looking to you for an in-depth tutorial in the middle of a podcast. They just want to know about the landscape within which that project fits. Like, how is it licensed? How is it maintained? What can I do with this thing? What's the problems that these things can solve? So really, a podcast is just like a discovery vehicle. It's like sitting down the pub with your mates, having a chat, except it's a one-way conduit because of the medium. Whereas a video, I approach videos very differently. And sometimes this is my Achilles heel. Like, I'll have an idea and I'll be like, oh, I could do this thing. And then I think, well, how do I package it? Because every time somebody watches something of mine, I want them to leave smarter or more equipped to do something in the future. So like a tutorial, for example. So that means you've got to have code snippets. You've got to build the environment. You've got to then figure out, do I have the right font size? Like, can people actually see what I'm doing? And
Yep.
And because you're on video, people can read your body language. Whereas on a podcast, it's just audio and nobody can see that I'm actually like, I don't really know what I'm talking. Like, and as humans, we're very good at those subtle cues of picking those things up. And it's a lot more work doing video, like, no question. Like the demands on just setting up this room, even like I converted the attic in my house to have a dedicated quiet space to record in, because it's not really very fair to ask a 4-year-old to be quiet for half the day whilst I'm recording. So audio versus video, completely different animals, completely different audiences, actually. Also, there's a Venn diagram with an overlap, but they're completely different beasts, and I like them both equally. I love them both equally. Hate them both equally.
That's fair. I think you're great at doing both. So I understand that they can be pretty different, though. That makes a lot of sense.
Definitely.
You mentioned earlier that you have been a Homelabber since before it was really called Homelabbing. How long have you been Homelabbing? When what was your first piece of equipment?
Yeah. I would say it was probably my desktop computer when I was a teenager, because I remember, I think it was like a Pentium 4, maybe, with a 2.53 gigahertz clock speed.
That was the one with the cartridge socket, I think, as well. Is that the one?
No, I think it was still like an LGA type socket. But
okay.
I built this computer for my 13th birthday, and I remember we had this parents' evening at school, and I'd spent all evening with my dad and afternoon, like birthday day, building this thing, and I couldn't get it working. We plugged everything in, we triple checked everything and all the rest of it. We went to school and I was miserable at this parents' evening because I'm like, oh, this computer I've spent all my birthday money on doesn't work. And then we got home and I noticed the 4-pin power cable for the CPU wasn't plugged in.
Oh.
Anyway, this is how you learn, right?
Joyous moment. That is.
Education is not free in any respect. So anyway, that was my first computer. And then I remember being at school and getting, like a teenager does, caught up in the safe filtering that you have on the school internet, and thinking, there's got to be a way. I could just remote into my home computer. Can I not just use my home computer somehow? And so in the IT lab, we span up remote desktop, and I did some port forwarding foo in my router, and then I accessed my computer at home on my desk at home from school, and it was like a light bulb in my head of, oh, so you mean the internet there? The school can't track me. This is great.
Yeah. I convinced my dad in high school to let me get a business modem with a static IP, so that way I could access it.
Yeah, I think I used DIN DNS back in the day for that.
Oh yeah, yep.
But then, after a while, you start, acquiring media and stuff like that, and for me, it was like organizing iTunes libraries and stuff. Like, that was one of the things. And then I remember probably sort of 2010, 2011, I just started the Apple Store in that era. And I was streaming from Subsonic to my phone because I couldn't afford to pay for Spotify back then because I was a poor student, really. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, I can just have files on my computer at home and I can stream them over 3G to my phone. Oh, and that was like the beginning of the self-hosting movement for me. So I started messing around with, I think originally I had a Synology, and then I switched that out for a self-built PC with Unraid, and that was like training wheels are off time. Unraid was, yeah, Unraid was great. And then Docker came along. And after a while, it became pretty clear to me that the Docker thing was going to stick around. But the trouble with it back then was that nobody was really... There was no standardization of Docker images really back then. It was like the Wild West. The documentation was all over the place, if it even existed. The base images were not common, so you were pulling down all sorts of random stuff. So me and a couple of buddies founded the linuxserver.io website to try and solve that problem. And I still see little snippets of my original documentation and like the ways in which I phrase certain things floating around in Docker documentation to this day, which is kind of cool. But
that is cool. That's really cool.
I've been into self-hosting, I guess, my whole life. I just didn't know what to call it back then.
Self-hosting is very cool, at least in my opinion, because it's very personal to whoever it is that's deciding to self-host. Kind of regardless of how much money you have, it will consume all of the money that you would like to give it.
Yeah. What's your budget? Yes, please.
Yeah, pretty much. Doesn't matter if you're a student or you're doing this as just a fun thing to do. You also work in tech, or you do something else entirely, and it's just a fun hobby instead of cars or whatever, right? You're into home labbing, and kind of on that note of it'll take pretty much as much money as you would like to give it, or as much time as you would like to give it. I'm really curious, what's been your sort of best home lab purchase that you've ever made? We kind of talked about your first, but I'd love to know your best, and maybe what your worst home lab purchase that you've ever made. Can I start with the worst? I don't think there's much competition. It's probably the Threadripper stuff that I put on my KTZ Systems YouTube channel earlier this year. It was like $3,000 or $4,000 for the motherboard and CPU and the RAM. And just the BIOS was just buggy, and I was trying to do PCIe pass-through and bifurcation, and it was just a mess. So I ended up taking it back to Micro Center, which for me is a 3-hour drive to Charlotte to do that. So, probably the Threadripper was the worst one. That's interesting. I know it's kind of the sort of, a lot of people sort of aspire to have a Threadripper workstation.
Because it's got more threads, and Lord Wendell of the YouTubes level 1 techs, I love Wendell, says it's good, but the reality is it's power hungry. It's never had quite the mainstream adoption that it needed to get those kinks ironed out. So it's one of those things that it has a lot of promise, but in practice, it doesn't actually play out.
That's fair. So that's the worst. What's the best?
Best. I don't know. When I immigrated to the States about 7 or 8 years ago, I remember going to Best Buy and buying literally 8 Easy Store hard drives all at once and shucking those. I have a picture somewhere of the boot of my Golf, literally with 8. I work. There's like three Best Buys within a radius of my house here, and I literally went to each one and picked up 2, and then just went in as like, I put my baseball hat on and went in. Bought 2 more to like kickstart my home server, because when I emigrated, I left my old server in England as an offsite backup, and then built a new one when I got here. So I would say probably, actually, that was, it's not a single purchase, but it was pretty cool to just be able to walk into a store and buy discs like that, because you can't do that in England. Like,
interesting.
The Best Buy as a concept, you'd think would exist in England, and it kind of sort of does with Currys. If you even remember Comet, I guess, if you're in the UK, maybe. But actually, when you go to a Best Buy, it's like both of those stores, what they should be. Best Buy is great. I love Best Buy. It's not sponsored, as we talked about. This channel doesn't do sponsorships, but
I was gonna say, you're talking about hard drive shucking and Best Buy. I've definitely done that on a Black Friday deal. Going to get 2 external hard drives that you're gonna shuck for 50% off, basically. Yeah,
in fact, all of the hard disks in my UK server right now. Last time I went back, I took 4 14 terabyte drives and upgraded them and threw them in that box in England. They are all ex-shucked drives. And people talk about the reliability of them and all the rest of it, but I've had one, and I've bought maybe 20 of these things over the last 7 years. I've had one fail, and I sent it back to Western Digital, and they just sent me back a new boxed, like they put they knew it was originally a shucked drive, like an external drive, so they just sent me a whole new retail boxed unit. They didn't care.
That's nice. Yeah.
They didn't care.
It's great to hear about the warranty.
Yeah. It's real. It exists. Because I think this thing is called the Magnuson-Moss Act in the States, where they have to prove that my shucking it broke it, and like 9 months into its lifespan, they can't really. So, yeah,
it's not really
just
worth
easier
it
for
to
them.
prove that either.
Yeah. To them, I can't imagine what the cost production price on a hard drive is, but it sure ain't what I'm paying.
Moving continents is definitely one way to do a 3-2-1 backup situation.
Yeah. Tailscale makes it really easy too. I mean, we've got to bring it back to the bread and butter for a second. Genuinely though, like I do ZFS replications, I've got a friend up in Canada who runs an MSP, and he's given me 4U of rack space, and I have a ton of hard drives up there, which I replicate using Tailscale there, and then I also replicate to my old server in England, which also happens to run a Plex instance, and by the way, so I can stream BBC and all the rest of it through an HD home run tuner, which is really nice.
We won't tell the BBC.
Well, so it's like this is actually a topic that's really important to talk about for a second, because one of the more difficult aspects of running a corporate YouTube channel is, particularly in the self-hosting space, there are certain grey areas which I will leave up to you to fill in the blanks. You've got to be really sensitive, because the legislations in different countries are all different, and like circumventing geo blocks and content restrictions and all the rest of it. Like we cannot really sit here and tell you how to do that. I mean, that's just not going to go down well. It's not going to go down well for anybody. So there are a bunch of videos I would love to make, but I just can't.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of requests for certain videos on how to do these sorts of things. Well, we've been talking moving. We've been talking Homelabs.
Oh, yeah.
And I know the audience may not know, but I know that recently you...
Surprise.
You're currently in the process of moving houses. And in that process of moving houses, you did have to get rid or sell or kind of give away all of your Homelab stuff that you've accrued. And so I'm wondering, what is the Alex ideal Homelab setup for, I guess, and really for this phase of your life?
Probably edit a lot more video than the average person. So you've got to remember that some of my demands here are based in moving 100 gigs worth of files around every day. I did have a full 10 gig, like every workstation, every area had 10 gig to it. But I think that turned out to be pretty overkill for a lot of, like this recording laptop, for example. The largest files that I will take off this laptop and put to my editing one behind me is like a screen recording, which is like a few hundred meg. So I'll just use AirDrop to send that from this computer to that one. The actual camera recording is to an external recorder via an SSD, and then I'll just plug that in over USB over there as well. So I don't actually need 10 gig to this station. As long as I've got a wired gigabit connection, we're all good. But generally speaking, I think this is a conclusion I came to in the spring when I was messing around with that Threadripper stuff, is that less is more in a way. Like it's better to have smaller compartmentalized units of compute and not giant machines that you're trying to do absolutely everything, like one machine to rule them all. It's just a recipe for disaster. What happens when you've got to reboot it, or the graphics card fails, or a stick of RAM goes bad, or whatever? So I've actually taken quite taken to that new Minis Forum MS01. I really like that. I'm using that for a lot of stuff. It's got 96 gigs of RAM in the damn thing, so I can spin up 2 or 3 Kubernetes clusters just on that one little box, alongside Home Assistant, alongside a bunch of my critical like DNS and all the rest of it. And then I've got a separate storage box, which is like a 19-inch rack size box that from Sliger, I think, that has like 10 3.5-inch hard drives in it.
Yeah, you recommended that one to me. I am hoping to get one of those soon.
I'm actually really happy with the setup I've got. Like we're moving back to England, just to clarify, or at least trying to. The house has been on the market now for 2 or 3 months, and sadly no takers yet. But Hopefully in the spring that'll turn around. But when I go back to England, I've got to be cognizant of the fact that electricity prices are 3 or 4 times what they are here. So I'm thinking about energy efficiency. So those tiny mini micro systems are perfect for that because they use like 5 watts at idle. Yeah, I think it's just keep it simple, actually, at home is my mantra. Like I've got a separate set of those Dell 1 litre PCs for Tailscale purposes, like as a Tailscale lab. I've then got a couple of nodes I use as like pseudo prod. And then I've got a couple of Lenovo minis that I use for tinkering about with my stuff. And it's like compartmentalize each area of tinkering, but you don't need huge rack systems to do that anymore. Those mini micros, damn, it just base everything around those.
Production in your household is very much a real thing.
Yeah. If you've ever interrupted your kid's Peppa Pig or Bluey by accidentally rebooting the server, you'll understand.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's maybe even more critical of a production system than many people realize.
Don't need down detector. I've just got my family to text me instead.
Yep. They will let you know.
Also, there's an aspect of like, I do this for a day job also. Like my job really is like, officially it's DevRel, right? But if you look at it, really, it's kind of like an R&D type position of like, figuring out cool and interesting ways to use the product and like applying that to real world use cases and all the rest of it. So there is an element of R&D. And so like I come home in the evening and I've been tinkering with Docker and Kubernetes and networking for the last 8 hours. I don't necessarily, because it was my hobby before I, got the job. Do I want to do that all evening as well? Probably.
So no
like
Homelab K3S cluster? No.
Sometimes I will. There's a gentleman we work with called Raj who is he was showing me through his Kubernetes Homelab yesterday, and I'm like,
it's awesome,
dude. Why? he's got clusters all around the world and like YAML files out the wazoo, and I'm just like, I just stick with my single Docker Compose YAML file. Thanks, mate.
Yeah. I know he just got one of those NVIDIA DGX Sparks as well.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
He was talking to me about maybe clustering those.
I'll tell you the other thing that made a big change for me was I switched out from a fully like non-managed network to having a managed network through Unify, probably 2 years ago now. Switching out to Unify and being able to like have proper VLAN support at the firewall level. And so like I switched out from OpenSense to a UDM Pro, I think I've got the Fiber, the new Fiber Max or whatever it's called now, the little one that I can take back to England with me. That made a huge difference because the polish around the Unify ecosystem is just great. I mean, you do pay a premium to get into it, but once you've bought the switches, like you're good for a long time, And so like my Tailscale network, I have a VLAN that is broadcast via Wi-Fi. So whenever a device joins that SSID, it's automatically on the Tailscale VLAN. And so when I'm demoing stuff and I need to show people on video, like, well, here's my IP address, and I can't reach this local network, it's because I've got, isolation turned on between those VLANs. It makes it really easy. There is a tax to get in, like I said, but
I do too. I've got Unify myself, cool. And I don't mind getting the little notifications that it was auto upgraded in the middle of the night. I didn't have to do anything.
And having a managed switch for the first time was quite a revelation to me. For many years I just used unmanaged and thought it was fine. But
you mentioned Windle earlier, and in terms of you love Windle and Level 1 Techs, are there any other YouTubers that you maybe when you were either starting out or now, still now kind of look to, love to watch, either in the Homelab space or maybe not?
There's the big guys like Jeff Geerling, of course, who I've watched for many years. There's Wendell, to some degree, Linus Tech Tips too. Like I know he gets a lot of hate, but actually the server videos that had that Jake guy in them, I actually always really enjoyed them. Particularly the one where they lost data, because you learn so much watching people that lose data. There's another one called, I can't say his name. It's like Apal.
Oh, yeah.
Bird.
The orange thumbnails.
The
kind of the orange. He's got
like the visual polish of that guy is very low, but the actual content of what he talks about is it's always really interesting. Like he finds unusual.
Yeah, the HDMI over Ethernet one is very, very cool.
He's great. He really is great. So if you haven't heard of him, check him out. You know, Techno Tims, the Raid Owls, the Two Guys Tech. There's tons. Christian Lemper, of course, is another one. Depending on how much coffee I've had, Network Chuck is also worth a watch too. I mean, I think you'll either love him or hate him. I think certain topics, though, he just does a really great way of like breaking these things down. And his presentation style, with the way like he draws on the screen and stuff, I just think is great. Like there's an approachability to what his content is that's very mainstream compared to your average tech YouTuber. And so like I try and bring a lot of what all of these guys have into what I'm doing, but I try and do it in much more of a measured fashion. Like I'm not really, personally, I don't really want to play the clickbait game. Like it's be informative, be authentic is the guiding principle of what I do. But there's tons. I've probably missed loads.
It's not an Oscars accepted.
There's a few. Typecraft is another one on YouTube. He helps me make my terminal look beautiful.
That is a yes. Yeah. Very much so.
Oh, I'll tell you a YouTuber that's completely unrelated to Tailscale that is absolutely worth a watch. Drain Cleaning Australia.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, good. You've seen this guy.
Yeah.
What a little ripper. He's great.
Oh, boy. Yeah. No, that's a good one. Very satisfying. Very satisfying.
Yeah. Not one to watch over dinner, perhaps.
No, there's some nasty drain. Well, I guess you talked a bit about the history of the channel, how you got here, things that, inspired you, all those sorts of things. But I'm wondering where does with 50,000 subscribers, right? But I know you're still aiming at that play button. So where does the channel go from here?
Well, we actually this week find ourselves at an interesting point for me personally, because I'm taking on some extra responsibilities at Tailscale and moving into like a head of developer relations position. I'm still going to be doing the videos.
Congratulations.
Certainly in the short term, there is nobody else to do them. So not much will change outwardly, but I'm taking on a bunch of internal responsibilities as well. And so I think for me, the goal here is to like mature and broaden what the channel can do. And that kind of means expanding the formats, I suppose, and like tightening the production, like trying to level the bar up every time, like more visual polish, try and like do customer case studies on the channel. And I'm trying to serve like 5 different audiences. I've got, of course, the audience that's watching this. I've got the casual audience that doesn't watch the in-depth stuff like we're doing now. I've got the sales team that wants some sales enablement content making. I've got the marketing team that want marketing content making. And each of those masters want different things. And so like it's trying to make sure that we maintain the authenticity throughout those changes. And so I've been thinking about what we need to do to make that possible. And I think sort of growing the team seems like a natural next step, but we don't know really what the roles would look like yet. And this is like an open call to action to everybody watching, because presumably if you're this deep into this video, you're probably one of the types of people we're looking for. So if you enjoy explaining complex systems simply, and you kind of thrive on the curiosity around discovering and like teaching people stuff, DevRel adjacent roles. So like, if you are good at video editing, if you're skilled in some kind of like animations or graphic stuff, we're still very much shaping what these roles might look like. Just reach out. You can come find us on discord.gg/tailscale. I'm over there at AlexKTZ. That's a great place to chat with us. And really, if you're earlier on in your career or have come from like an unconventional path, but you have some of those skills and some of those curiosities, reach out. I would love to hear from you and help kind of shape what those roles might look like to fit you.
Yeah. I mean, I know I love working at Tailscale, and I love working with you, and love working with you enough that I was super excited to even propose an interview like this. So more people could hear a bit more about you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been weird, but also,
Well, thank you for humoring me. I think there are a lot of, a lot of our audience who will be very excited to.
Well, thank you for being part of the 50,000 subscribers. I assume you're subscribed, of course.
I am.
Yeah.
I get all my. I've got the bell. I've got all the notifications. Though usually I feel like you send me an early draft of whatever video.
I do not do that whole like, comment, subscribe thing because I feel like if the content's good enough, it'll resonate enough and if it's not good enough that a reminder is required, then you've got to make it better. So
Yeah. Yeah, I suspect anybody who's at this point in the video is probably subscribed.
I hope so.
And
if you're not, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
yeah, or reach out or join the Discord, like Alex mentioned. We would, I mean, even if it's not a YouTube comment, we would love to hear from you. It's really awesome. Hearing
I read
from
every
folks.
comment still on the channel. We get loads now, but I still read every one, and they inform a lot of what we do. So
yeah, please, 50,000 subscribers. I know we're talking about the number, but it is, like you mentioned, it's because of the viewers that we're here, and you as the viewer, you have the opportunity to help, make the channel better.
that's it. That's how it goes. It's a two-way street, and I wouldn't be here without you, and you wouldn't be here without Tailscale. So,
yeah. And again, like
truly, I get to do what I do because I stand on the shoulders of giants. Like, there's an amazing team behind the scenes. The marketing team that I'm a part of is one of the most coherent teams I've ever been a part of. But then there's the engineering teams. There's just so many people. I can't, it's not an Oscars acceptance speech. You said that already, but like, it takes a village, truly. And Tailscale is probably the nicest village I've been to for a while. So
yeah, I can
come join us. It's fun.
absolutely agree with that. Again, the engineering team makes magic happen, and we get to talk about it. Do we want to do I've been Remy, and then you can do the I've been Alex?
No. You just
okay.
Thanks so much for watching, and I've been Alex from Tailscale. It's as easy as that.
Wait,
That's what you got to do.
so thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, I've been Remy from Tailscale.
Hey, that's my line.